I'm Tim Diggs. I am a TapRooT instructor and improvement program advisor at System Improvements. And today we're going to be talking about what are standards, policies, and administrative controls, the three most common problems with those standards, policies, and administrative controls, and how you can fix those problems and have better standards and controls to ensure you get that desired workforce behavior and production. So, what are standard policies and administrative controls? Standards, policies, and administrative controls are your standardized work practices and rules. These include written company policies, written procedures, written checklists. Often people want to include unwritten rules or that tribal knowledge in their definition of an administrative control. I don't agree with that. If something is critical enough that it needs to have a standardized practice, then that rule, that standard, that policy, that guidance that you're giving the workers, it needs to be written down. I mean, how can you rely on anything that has to just be known? You can't. It's not going to be known. So these critical standards, policies, and administrative controls, they need to be written. Now, standards and policies and administrative controls exist. These establish the ways an organization coordinates and does work. They establish leadership's expectations and are necessary to achieve these desired behaviors from your workforce. To achieve these desired behaviors and results, workers have to know how they are supposed to do something and what is expected of them. That's what the standards and administrative controls do, is they give guidance to those workers on their behaviors and what they're supposed to do in their jobs. Now, the three most common problems with standards, policies, and administrative controls are they're inadequate, they have unintended consequences, and they are ignored or not followed by the workforce. Now, inadequate SPAC, they do not accomplish their intentions even when they are followed by the workers. They're inadequate because they're too lenient. They don't conform to your company or your industry standards or required regulations or laws. They're not strong enough. They have too much leeway or allow for interpretation from the users that delivers substandard results. Interpretation from the users. Imagine a procedure that reads, tighten the nut. Well, what does tighten mean? Tighten to you and tighten to me is going to be two different things. That's allowing for my interpretation. So when you're writing your standards or even evaluating your current ones that you have, you're going to need to be concise and complete. Have and give attention to all the detail. Don't leave anything for interpretation. In our example with tightening the nut, obviously, we're going to have a measurement with that. Tighten the nut to 40 foot-pounds or whatever the case may be. Now, not only are we going to be concise in our standards in telling what needs to be done, but we may even need to consider, do we need to include why? You know, show that if you don't do this, here's the consequence it could be. Why does this nut need 40 foot-pounds? The more critical the task, the more critical the job, the more explanation your written policies and procedures are going to require. When you're writing your standards or policies or procedures, do it in coordination with, at least, but maybe even go above and beyond your particular industry standard, laws, and regulations. Hold your teams to a higher level. No one ever became the best at something by doing the same thing as everyone else. So keep that in mind when you're issuing your standards. Set a higher target. Set a higher expected behavior. Now, unintended consequences. That's our second most common problem. And it's a problem among itself, but it also contributes to standards and policies being inadequate, and also our third most common problem of the workers not following or ignoring the standard. So you're going to want to evaluate for unintended consequences before even issuing the standard. Find out how this new standard or policy is going to affect the people who have to work with it. Does this conflict with an existing standard that is already in place, or usual work practices or intentions? Even if you know how the job is supposed to be done, go out and audit the current practices. Understand why workers are doing tasks a certain way and how they do those tasks and why. How does this step relate in the work process? How do all of these tasks relate with each other to achieve that final goal? Think about this. How many times you yourself have you seen where a new standard or a new policy was issued on how we're going to complete a certain task or do a certain job? And just by reading this standard, you can tell that the person who was the author of this has no idea how this job gets done in the real world, or why, or how it relates to something else. Okay? You can simply avoid this problem by just going and conducting audits and evaluations. You are going to have to talk to people. Start with the people who are going to have to work with this standard. Okay? In the case of it being a new standard, how is this going to affect the tasks they already do? What's this going to do in handing off to the next step or the next worker? How are these related? You know, asking yourself, how are these jobs being done? What do we need to address or improve on in this standard? You can't improve a process issuing a new standard or policy if you don't understand that process in its entirety and its relationship to other tasks. Now, standards and policies with unintended consequences, they will not meet their intentions. Those controls are disregarded or, at best, not completely followed by your workforce. So, unintended consequences is not the only reason that your standards, policies, and administrative controls are not used or followed. There are two other things that really contribute to that problem. The first is poor or no communication. This is a failure for communicating the standard through the entire organization, from the utmost levels down. Successful communication not only requires those formal means like training and oral communications and directives to be successful, but they also require informal means of communication. Informal means is this leading by example, okay? All levels of leadership buying into this standard and demonstrating it by following it. You can't have a stance of rules for thee but not for me type approach to these things. Everyone in the organization has to know and follow the standards. When leadership is setting the example, you might know this as putting money where your mouth is and vigorously in pursuit to comply. This is going to drive self and peer monitoring throughout the company. Think about this. How great would it be if your workers are always constantly looking for ways to comply with your standards and are coming to you with ideas on how to make this better or more efficient or safer? That's really what we're all out there to do, right? That's why we're setting these standards and policies. We have a certain idea of how this work needs to be done, or how we want our employees to behave in certain situations or with each other and things like that. And that's why we issue these standards in the first place. So to get that, it has to start with that communication, both those formal means and informal means. Now, the second aspect that directly leads to standards and policies and administrative controls not being followed or ignored is the enforcement of these standards. Leadership at any level can never wear blinders. Every standard, every company policy, every control that you have in place in your organization, all levels of leadership need to think about those different standards and policies and rank them all equally. We can't enforce one particular standard and then ignore when we see non-compliance on another. We have to address every situation to ensure that all standards are followed. If we put those blinders on, look the other way on certain things, that's eventually going to cause your entire standard and control program to fail. You're going to eventually get to a point where nobody's following any of your standards or policies. Okay? Accepting non-compliance is generally more common in that frontline or direct supervision. And there's a reason for this. It's not that these frontline or direct supervisors, these guys who are in the trenches with the workers, don't care. It's that they don't know. They don't understand this particular policy's intent, or they think they have a better, easier, more efficient, safer way to do something. Okay? When you are doing those formal means of communication and you're training the workforce on this standard or policy, you can't overlook that direct supervisor level. Okay? For best results, you're going to have to educate them perhaps even more than the workforce. For every standard we have, that frontline leadership needs to understand why we have it, what its intent is, why it's important. Now, in addition to giving that kind of education and communication to those frontline supervisors to drive that enforcement and ensure that they are holding everyone to following every standard that we have, a very powerful way you can enhance this is to get their input. When you're writing out how a certain job is going to be done or what is expected, you know, the people in charge of this job is one of your great sources of information. Gathering input from this direct supervision or this frontline level when you're setting and writing your administrative controls, that's going to drive ownership with those people. Their opinions are considered. And it's very easy, or at least much easier, to get that enforcement to come if it's their ideas and their understanding of what you're wanting to accomplish. So those are the three most common problems with standards, policies, and administrative controls. They're inadequate, they are not used or not followed, and have unintended consequences. When you understand those three most common problems, the solutions and ways to avoid those somewhat present themselves. They're very straightforward to address. The problems that we talked about are not all of the possible problems with standards, policy, and administrative controls. Those are just the most common. The blueprint, the guidance on how standards, policies, procedures, and administrative controls can fail or be weak, all of those are included in our TapRooT Root Cause Tree Dictionary. This is available on our website and our store in our investigation packs. It also comes with your course materials for any TapRooT training course that you take. Now, good standards, strong standards, policies, and administrative controls that don't have these common problems, they're not going to get that desired behavior on their own. But they are the essential building block. This is the playbook that our workers are going to use for those desired behaviors. You still have to consider the human factors of the jobs, the training that you're doing, what are your quality hold points, what kind of supervision and crew teamwork are you giving these workers? You can't be successful just on the standards and policies. You're going to have to dedicate as much time to those other areas of human performance as well. So to learn all about every way that we can not only investigate, but in a proactive way, put ourselves in a position to always achieve that highest level of human performance that we want, you need to attend a 5-day TapRooT Advanced Team Leader course. If you can't do that, attend at least the 1-day TapRooT Executive Leadership course. Doing this is going to give you all of the knowledge you need to achieve these desired behaviors. Now, if you want to learn more about the particular topic that I've talked to you about today, check out my blog article, Common Problems with Standards, Policies, and Administrative Controls, and How to Have Better Ones. You can access that on our TapRooT blog page or wherever you are already getting the TapRooT blog articles. Feel free to reach out to us to discuss more or learn more about our offerings and other topics involving human performance. You can reach us by going to www.taproot.com and requesting more information. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.